So now the economy is going to look a little different from the closed economy case. First, the budget constraint is going to change. Even though liberalization does not change the amount of savings we have, it does change what vehicles we choose to save through. Before, we only had capital, but now we have the possibility of saving in terms of bonds. So now, if we lend to the world, this is going to reduce our consumption today, but it is going to allow us to increase our consumption tomorrow. And if we borrow from abroad, notice that this means this B is negative, because we will be having a negative asset position. Then, this being less than zero means that this increases, so by borrowing today, we can consume more today, but tomorrow, this is negative, so we will have to consume less. So it is just another savings vehicle. Before, we only had capital, but now we can also use bonds. Now, you can see here why a country might have an incentive not to enforce the debt payments and default. Basically, by defaulting, you're not paying back this amount that you borrowed, so you're able to consume more in the second period. So in the paper, what the authors do is say, look, we can either be lenders or be borrowers, but we cannot be both. So either this is the case or this is the case. We cannot be borrowing and lending at the same time to the rest of the world. So if we're lending, then this is going to be positive. We'll be lending money to foreigners and we'll be getting back a fixed amount, RT plus 1 star, which is equal to 1. But since, we're lending, that means that we have some savings, right? If you're a domestic guy who has to decide what to do with their savings, you can either invest in capital and get the MPK in the future, or invest in bonds, foreign bonds, and get the, one in the future. Now, as always, we need to make this guy indifferent between these two vehicles. So to do that, we have to equalize these two returns. So when we're lending to the rest of the world, the return on investing in capital, which is the MPK, is going to be equal to 1, which is the return on foreign assets, RT plus 1 star. And if we were a perfectly solvent borrower and we will be, borrowing without a risk premium at all, then this would also happen to us. So this would be how the low motion of the capital stock would look like when we open up. If we're here, we'll be lending to the rest of the world. And if we're here, we'll be borrowing from the rest of the world. But the problem is that when we are borrowing, we have to pay a risk premium. So this is not going to be a straight line anymore. So this is the kind of picture that you want to keep in your mind when you're a lender. When your capital level is above certain threshold, then you would just be, after opening up, having a marginal product of capital that's just equal to 1. And then when you open up, and if you are below a certain threshold, you'll be borrowing. And if there is no risk that you will default, that is, if institutions are so good that this pi is equal to 1, then it will also be a straight line. But typically countries with low pi, countries with a high probability of default will have to pay higher interest rates. And countries that have better institutions will have a lower probability of default and will have to pay lower interest rates for borrowing. The way we model this is that whenever these institutions are bad, we will have a higher risk premium, and whenever the amount of borrowing that we're doing with respect to the size of the economy is really high, then this will also increase the risk premium. The basic intuition is that, when this goes down, this just goes up. And the way this risk premium is going to look like is, a negative function of the pi. So if pi goes down, the premium is going to go up. Whereas institutions lead to, more probability of default and then higher risk premium. And then also, this is the amount of borrowing that you're doing with respect to the actual level of the capital stock. So if you're borrowing a lot relative to the size of your economy, then the risk premium is going to go up. Notice that if you're a borrower and you have super good institutions, if your pi is equal to 1, then this is just going to be 0, and the risk premium will be non-existent. So after opening up, this is how the new low motion would look like. If you have a lower risk premium because your institutions are good, you will be growing more if you open up. And if you are poor but you have really bad institutions and you open up, well, you will grow less because the risk premium that they will be charging you will be higher. So in this picture, you can see that if you're a poor country, you open up, you will grow much slower if your institutions are bad, and if your institutions are good, if pi is high, the convergence will be much faster.